Welcome to NPTEL's course on communication skills. In the first introductory module and the very first lecture, we looked at the introductory aspects of communication skills. We looked at the need for communication. More specifically, we looked at the need for effective communication. I discussed about the modalities of communication and then how you can make your communication very effective. I also hinted at the fact that there are some barriers which will actually prevent you to make your communication very effective. In this module, module number 2, lecture number 1, we will focus on the barriers to communication. And there is a second module in which we will focus on miscommunication. First about the barriers to communication. And before I start talking to you about the barriers to communication, once again let us recall why communication skills are very important. I would like to recall why it is very important from a famous statement made by one of the shrewdest investors of the world, that is Warren Buffett. He says, if you improve your communication skills, I guarantee you that you will earn 50% more money over your lifetime. What he says is that communication skills will fetch you 50% of your earnings. That's double what you can earn just by enhancing your communications. So, I talked about more significance of communication as how it is more related even in your personal and professional life. But if you even keep this view in mind that overall it is going to enhance your productivity, prosperity, so it is a good way to think about enhancing your communication skills. Look at another statement from Emerson which focuses on another aspect of communication, a very significant aspect of communication. The quote from Emerson is this. He says, thought is the blossom, language the bud, action the fruit behind it. Now, I would like to read action here as communication, because communication means action, reaction, interaction as well as transaction. So, all actions put together we call it as communication. So, if you apply what Emerson says, he says thought is the blossom, okay. So, it looks like a flower, language the bud, action the fruit behind it. Okay. So, if it blossoms well, you get the fruit out of it. So, if the thought is clear, so then the communication is effective. But in between, as I said, there is this process of action, reaction, and then there is interaction and transaction. Unlike what Emerson says, communication process is not that easy and it is not as natural as a leaf to a tree. It will not be that spontaneously happening, the flow will not be that easy. Why? Because there will be some kind of barriers, and that is the focus of this lecture. In this module and particularly in this lecture, you will learn about barriers to communication. What are barriers, how do we define barriers, and what kind of barriers we need to keep in mind to make our communication effective. Basically, we are going to focus on 3 kinds of barriers. The first kind, which are arising from sender and or receiver's personality. The first kind is related to personality barriers, and then the second is also related to that, but more in terms of transactions, interpersonal transactions, barriers which come in between interpersonal transactions, and the third is related to organizational network. Probably the third one we will be looking at it in the next lecture of this module, but overall I am just trying to tell you these are the major barriers. At the end of it and even in between, when I talk about the barriers, I will also try to talk about overcoming the barriers to communication. How can you overcome the barriers? Now, first, what are barriers? How do we define barriers? Now, barriers are like something that physically blocks you, things which are obstacles to effective communication in a intellectual sense, things which are causing disturbance, which are obstacles to effective communication, anything that impedes free flow of ideas, what is preventing your spontaneous overflow or your ability to express and convey your ideas easily, what is standing in between? Why can't somebody understand whatever you say as what you thought of? Why can't you mean exactly what you say, and why can't the receiver get exactly what you try to mean in your communication? Why the message is always distorted, or most of the times it is not communicated effectively? No, barriers are in between, they impede, they serve as obstacles, something that prevents active listening and careful response. Look at this carefully, something that prevents active listening. In the lectures which are going to come, there is a very important lecture on listening skills, an entire module is there on that. So, the focus is on active listening. Listening is not, as many of you think, is a passive skill, it is an active skill. What is preventing you to listen actively, pay complete attention, concentrate on what is being told to you, trying to receive the message 100%, something is preventing, and it is also preventing you to give a very careful response, very thoughtful response, responding to the sender in such a manner that the sender understands that the communication message is being given to you accurately, and you are able to receive it and you are able to respond it favorably. But something is preventing, and that something is what we call as barrier, and we are going to look at more examples of that. Now, these barriers act as physical, sometimes there are physical barriers blocking communication, mental barriers, emotional barriers, feelings which act as barriers, psychological blocks, mental blocks, psychological thinking, psychological aspects which actually cause barriers. What do? They result in failure of communication and or cause miscommunication. In the next lecture that follows it, we will be looking at more examples on miscommunication. Right now, we will focus on the barriers and how it can cause failure in communication. Once again, let me recall the communication process expanded model which we discussed in the first lecture. Look at this. In the simple diagrammatic manner, if you look at it, there are two persons, person A and person B, but we call person A as the sender because he is sending the message through the channel, and person B is the one who is receiving the message through the channel. So, he is sending it and he is receiving it. Now, if the communication circuit is likely to take place without any problem, then he will be stimulated to give some message, he may encode, decode, and then he sends that through a channel, and then this person decodes, understands, and then encodes again, and then gives the feedback. Now, this circular thing should happen spontaneously without any problem, but in between there are barriers. We are going to focus on these barriers because these barriers are not actually allowing whatever this person is sending to the other person who is receiving it to receive it in the most appropriate manner possible. Sometimes channel is distorting, sometimes problem is there in encoding decoding method, sometimes there is a lack of common frame of reference, sometimes there are language barriers, emotional barriers, psychological barriers. Let us look at those barriers. Now, generally, just for the sake of understanding, we can look at the barriers coming under three categories, three groups. The first one can be categorized under those barriers which are arising actually from sender and receiver's personality. So, the barriers which are actually arising from sender and or receiver's personality. So, mostly it is psychological, personality related one, perception oriented ones. Now, the other one is interpersonal transactions. When two people come together, apart from the psychological aspect, or there are other aspects, yes, there are cultural aspects for example, language problems for example. So, in interpersonal transactions, what are the barriers? And thirdly, the major barrier in communication today is taking place in organizational network. Everything is getting organized, and today we have lots of corporates, business networks, organizations. So, here again lots of barriers are happening. So, let us try to understand these three categories with examples and illustrations. Look at the aspect of encoding, decoding in terms of sender receiver, sending receiving communication message. Usually what happens, the person encodes a message in a particular language or using non-verbal communication, spoken form or written aspect of communication, and then sends it to the receiver, and the receiver is able to decode it easily. But more often this encoding decoding is not happening that easily, unless and otherwise if they are able to share a common code. This encoding decoding cannot happen that smoothly, that easily. So, sharing of a common code, language or a common frame of reference, in IIT parlance for example, box can mean not geometry box, but computer center actually. Okay. So, that is the common frame of reference. So, where people know by usage that certain thing has to be symbolically referred to or figuratively referred to in such a manner, and one should not take the dictionary or denotative meaning as such. Now, look at a simple example. Suppose there is this kind of message sent as an SMS from one mobile phone to another mobile phone. The message is this: short circuit at office, short circuit at office, please send an electrician. Now, there could be so many contexts, so many frames of references. A simple one like the manager telling one of his subordinates that there is a short circuit. So, when you come back, you send an electrician, find somebody on the way and send the person for repair. Absolutely clear. But it need not be electrician as such. Short circuit need not actually refer to the electrical short circuit, especially if the context will change. If it happens to be spy stories for example, if James Bond is sending this message to his boss M or to another spy, and this is the message, and if this is sent, so short circuit at office could mean as well my partner is kidnapped, it could also mean my assistant is killed, send someone for my help. So, you send a substitute, you send another assistant, which means send an electrician who will come and fix the job. So, depending on the frame of reference, the meaning changes. The person who knows the common frame of reference will be able to encode, decode smoothly, and the barrier will not happen. But if this common code is missing, language there is problem, and then common frame of reference is absent, so then it will not be possible for you to encode and decode properly. Look at another interesting example that happened between sender receiver. This example is to illustrate to you that even when the language is common, misunderstandings can happen, miscommunication can take place. How? When the sender is not clear about his her objective, or inappropriate use of language, or the sender uses the language not in the most appropriate manner possible, leaving some sense of ambiguity. For example, I am just going to narrate to you the real incident of an American tourist who missed a flight just because of a communication gap. Now, let us look at this. The housewife happens to go somewhere. She is a tourist, and then she has come back, maybe traveled quite a lot, and then she is wearing very gaudy dress, costly necklace, earrings, bracelets and all that. So very nicely decorated also, and she has lot of baggage along with her, and suddenly the customs officer stops her, the security stops her, and then he goes for a thorough checkup. So he calls for a female help, and then they even take her personally, they check her belongings, they frisk her thoroughly. They kept on doing this for more than an hour. At the end of it, they said that, okay, fine, ma'am, you can go. And then she was wild. She got angry because they delayed her, she missed her connecting flight. Okay, because they caused lot of delay in checking her belongings, so she had to miss her connecting flight. Then she got wild, and then she asked the person who checked her, she asked that, officer, what is this? Is it just fun? Is it your way of harassing some people who fly randomly and then you just wanted to have some fun, or is it your routine checkup and then I was victimized, I lost my connecting flight? So what do you say for this? And then the officer replied, ma'am, it's not like that. Then why? Ma'am, it's about your occupation. So what? So I asked you about your occupation, and then you said you are a nun. What did I say? Actually, what the housewife said was this: when he asked for her occupation, she didn't want to tell him that she happened to be a housewife, so she simply said nun. Now the confusion here is, the housewife said that her occupation is nun, N-O-N-E, meaning that no occupation, no specific occupation. She didn't want to say housewife. But the officer understood her as a nun. Now his confusion is, if she is a nun, N-U-N, and if she is a sister. Okay. Now if she is not looking like this and she is looking like somebody who is more interested in worldly pursuits, materialistic life, and he couldn't believe that. Was she telling a lie? So he was not sure. So it's just between this confusion that happened, same pronunciation, different spelling, different meaning, and it caused the lady to miss her flight and caused lot of misunderstanding between both the sender and the receiver. Now if you look at this case, both of them happen to be Americans. Both of them happen to be the native speakers of English. There was absolutely no problem in terms of speaking the language. There is no problem in terms of pronouncing the language correctly. But the problem happened because the sender didn't bother to tell the other person clearly what she meant when she said nun, and also the receiver took it for granted. When she said nun, he took it for granted that that is her occupation, and for a while he did not think that nun could also mean nothing. He didn't think that way. He didn't clarify, she didn't explain, she didn't elaborate more. She didn't had a small doubt as why he was doing this continuously. He also didn't seek clarification. Now if both had come down and then try to use a better word or try to seek clarification, this could have been sorted out. But this is an illustration to tell you that in spite the fact that you speak the language correctly, you pronounce the language correctly, then also communication blunders, communication mistakes can happen like this. That is because the sender or the receiver, they are not having a common frame of reference, they are not willing to use the language in a very appropriate manner. Look at some more examples, it will become easier. I am going to give you another example where the receiver is unable to understand and interpret the message properly. This is an interesting example from a classroom situation where the teacher happens to give a message and then one of the students could not get the message correctly. So let's see how it happened. This teacher thinking that he will be able to give the message very clearly, he wanted to demonstrate that. Instead of going and giving a lecture as such, he wanted to demonstrate it. So, what did he do and what was the message? The message was this: he wanted to tell the students that drinking arak, drinking liquor, okay, or taking drinks, okay, any kind of alcoholic drinks, he wanted the students to know that will be harmful to their health, it can even kill them. In order to illustrate this, what did he do? He went to the class with a bottle of arak, and even there it was written as arak, the crude form of liquor, and the smell itself was so pungent that in the entire class they could smell it as soon as he took the bottle. And he had another small transparent container in which he had just picked up some earthworms from the garden on his way, and the earthworms were alive, kicking, wriggling, moving around. So he just showed them those two bottles. He didn't tell what he was going to tell them, but he wanted them to take the message. So now the teacher is the sender. He is going to give a message. The message is drinking liquor in any form is going to harm you. So what did he do? He took the bottle and then he showed it to the students. He asked the students, do you see what is there in this bottle? So they said, yes sir, we can see. What is it? They said, sir, arak, arak. Okay, how do you know? Sir, it's written there and as well as we could smell it. So it's very bad, it's smelling so bad. Okay. Now what do you see in this small container? So they said, sir, we could see earthworms. So are they alive or dead? They are alive, sir, they are fully alive. So we could see them moving. Okay, now see what happens. He started picking one earthworm after another. He picked one, dropped it in the bottle. Now he dropped it slowly, but then as soon as the earthworm touched the arak, so it started wriggling very fast. It moved here and there, but then after some time it could not move. It became flat and slowly it settled down. It died. He took another one and then he dropped it. So the students were watching with enthusiasm, interest. Some were very sympathetic and they said, oh, they are dying. So he dropped one after another until all the earthworms were dead. Now he showed the bottle. He asked them, now can you see this? They said, yes sir. Have you got the message? Yes sir, we got the message. Have you understood it clearly? They said, yes sir, we have understood the message very clearly. Now what is the message? Can somebody tell this? And then one guy from the last bench was raising his hand and then he said that, sir, I can tell you the message very clearly. He said, yes, please go ahead, stand up and tell the message. He said, sir, you brought arak and then you put these earthworms there. So they died. So the message is this, that if you drink arak, if you take liquor, it will kill all the worms in your stomach. So sir, he said, we should be drinking arak every time we take food. We should be drinking some kind of liquor every time we have some trouble in stomach, so that it will go and kill all the worms in the stomach. Now the teacher was totally bewildered. So the message he wanted to give was, he wanted to tell the student, look, if you take arak, it will kill your stomach itself. It will kill your digestive system and it will eventually kill you. So in order to show that, he wanted to tell that how sensitive your stomach is, just like the earthworms. If it can kill the earthworms, it will kill your intestines also. So take care. So avoid taking this. But he took the contradictory, the opposite message. He thought that probably the teacher is telling us to take this, and then he wants us to take this regularly so that we can keep the system purified. Now what happened here? The sender went with the best of the intentions. The receiver was very attentive. He listened to the entire thing properly. But the message that he took out of this, he was not able to understand, interpret, make inferences. Now, what is the problem here? So, the problem here is related to the personality, maybe the cultural values, maybe the knowledge background level that he has, maybe the perspective that he has taken. So, these are all not making him take the message correctly. Now, what prevented him to take the message correctly is the one that I refer to as barrier. Look at more examples. Overall, when we talk about personality barriers, understand that mostly they are psychological in nature. What do people do? People tend to take for granted the commonality in communication. Remember, communication has come from communis or communicare, meaning something that is common, okay, that is shared in a common manner, shared by common people, something that is very easily and commonly done by all the people. But this commonality implies that you and I have mutual interest. I want to give you something and you want to take something from me in the form of ideas, thoughts, messages. But some people take this mutuality, this commonness for granted, and the difference in backgrounds are overlooked, and this causes communication gaps. Or difference in perception is also ignored. So, the way one student will perceive will not be the same way some other student will perceive the message given by the teacher. However good, however effective, however powerful, however illustrative the message could be, but the student, if he or she has a different perception, if there are perceptional barriers, so then the message could not be received by the student correctly. So, the background perception should not be overlooked. Let us take another classic example of the perceptional error, the perceptional difference, or due to the perception, the kind of standpoint that we take, and then we refuse to take the perceptional possibilities from the other. Look at the example that Branislaw Malinowski talks about during his interaction with the cannibal and when the Second World War was going on. Branislaw Malinowski is a very famous anthropologist, ethnographer. He has done a lot of research, written lots of books on studying various ethnic groups, and during Second World War he was focusing on some primitive cannibal types. So, the cannibals, as you know, are man-eaters. They eat human beings. But understand that they have their own decorum, otherwise he could have even killed Branislaw and eaten him. So, they have their own norm. So, they eat accordingly. So, when Malinowski was conducting the interview with him, the cannibal also wanted to ask him a question. So, then he thought that he should allow him to ask the question. He said, please go ahead. So, this was the time when the Second World War was happening. So, he explained about that to the cannibal, and then the cannibal asked a question in relation to that. He asked him how, or he wanted to know how the Europeans managed to eat the quantities of human flesh produced by massive killings. So, his query was, so they are killing people massively, how do they manage to eat their flesh? Because cannibal, he was thinking that everybody will be eating flesh. Now, Malinowski replied, and he was also taken aback. He said that Europeans never ate the flesh of the enemy they killed. He said they don't eat the flesh of the enemy they killed. To this, a very shocked and surprised response came from the cannibal. The cannibal was shocked. So, he asked, what kind of barbarians are you? He asked in horror to kill people without any real object. So he said, he implied, you cannibals, you barbarians, you brutes, you kill people without the objective of eating them, then why do you kill and why do you waste their flesh? Now what is interesting here is the perceptual difference. Malinowski thinking that he is coming from the civilization culture, and then he thinks that killing and not eating is a very civilized form of living. Whereas for the cannibal who eat human beings on purpose but will not kill human beings without any purpose, especially the purpose is not of eating the flesh of the human beings. So he was shocked, and this is a classic example of how perceptions differ. The civilized beings think that the cannibals are brutes, and the cannibals think that the civilized ones are barbarians who kill people, but they don't eat the flesh of the people whom they kill. Now look at next two pictures quickly and tell me what comes to your mind first. These are to tell you the perceptual differences. Look at these pictures. What comes to your mind first? Do you see the white vase or a wine cup, or do you see the dark faces, maybe a young couple, they are about to kiss each other? Do you see them or you see the vase? Some of you see the dark people who are there, some of you must have seen the cup immediately. How do you call this? When a cup is filled with water partially, so you call this half empty or half full. Now psychologists say that if you say that this is half empty, they say that you are a pessimist, and if you say that this is half full, they say that you are an optimist. So they say that it brings out two different shades of mankind, the thinking. So that the optimist always looks for something that is positive, and the pessimist always looks for something that is negative, that's gloomy. Same thing with white and black. So whiteness indicating purity, purity of thought, darkness indicating gloominess, negativity. So they say that looking at the picture, something strikes you first, but that is not to do with your eye, but that is to do with your mental, intellectual perception. So when even in a picture, if mankind can see things from two different perspectives, understand that even in communication, you are doing the same. You develop multiple perspectives. Now to continue with personality barriers, what contributes to one's perspective? Why should some of us always look at the gloomy side and some of the others always look at the positive side? Why is it that happening? Now if you look at it, the factors that contribute to one's perspective could be because of the socio-cultural milieu, the society and the culture that the person is surrounded with gives a perspective. Right from the birth, the parents, the neighbors, the school, the church, the railway station, the bus stop, the cinema theatre, the drama that he saw. Now all these things gives him a kind of perspective. One's interpersonal experiences, so the way a person was interacting with somebody while he was growing up, was the person an introvert, more intrinsically oriented, keeping thoughts to himself or herself, or was the person an extrovert, very outwardly speaking, socializing, interested in making friends? Now depending on these two aspects, whether the person was an introvert or an extrovert, the interpersonal experiences are being gathered. You make friends, you do not make friends. You make many friends, you make only one or two friends. You do not make friends. Now that determines your interpersonal experiences. The temperament, soft, hot-blooded, cold-blooded, angry, can be provoked easily, what kind of temperament, and the personality as such, pleasing, affable, no, unapproachable, looking to be very harsh in demeanor. Now, how do you look at the person and the person's ideas and values? The ideas and values will also give a kind of perspective. The person's position in life. I am going to elaborate more on this because it is very interesting to note that as you climb the social ladder, you take so many roles associated with that. There are so many positions. Each position that you take gives you a kind of perspective. So, and then even the religious and the political beliefs, so they also give you certain kinds of notions, and which cloud your perspective or which give you the perspective. What could be the position? The position we hold gives us a certain perspective which makes it difficult to understand others with different outlook. The position we have, we hold, will not let us take the other person's perspective or a different perspective at all. Look at this, the position of father, son. Father always says that the son is not listening to him, the son is not obedient, or the father says that there is a generation gap. But when the son grows to be the father, he always keeps complaining again against his son when he takes up the role of the father. So, father, son, teacher, student. So, again you can understand when the student will become the teacher, the role changes, the perspective changes. But then the teacher has a position from which the teacher may be punishing a student very harshly, whereas the student thinks that the punishment is so harsh and the teacher should have been considerate, and the teacher has not understood the problems of the students clearly because he could not put himself into the shoes of the students. Senior, junior, another interesting standpoint, position. Look at the colleges. Seniors, whether ragging is prevented completely or not, if you take a survey, it is the senior students who are more interested in having ragging in colleges. If you ask them, they say that ragging is a necessary evil. We should of course rag the students, and if you are not going to rag the students, so how are we going to culture them, tune them, nurture them, develop their personality? But you ask the juniors, when they enter into the college, they say that no, we should not be ragging the students. Students should not be ragging us. So, we are quite worried about ragging, and we will complain to the principal, we will complain to our parents if we find that somebody is ragging us. So, the perspectives change, but the same juniors, when they become seniors, they say that now we will be starting ragging. Why? Because they say that they ragged us before, so now we will do it. Now, see the change in perception between student and then they are same student, but between their position as senior and junior, so then there is this problem. Okay. The son, when he becomes the father, changes his perspective. The student, when he takes the position of a teacher, changes his perspective, and more interestingly, the junior, when he becomes the senior, changes his perspective. Look at the junior, when he enters the college, he says that he hates ragging, and he says that ragging should be punished, so it is an evil. Look at the attitude of the father of this junior student. The father says that he will not tolerate any kind of ragging that will be caused on his son. Now, how is it that they change their perspective? Because they take the position. When the son becomes the senior, the father also becomes the father of a senior son. So, now when the son becomes the senior, he says that ragging is a necessary evil, and we do this to develop the personality of the juniors, and it should be there. So, we should not be punished, it is just fun. And the father, in case the institute catches this student and calls the father to pay some amount as punishment, or they hand this person to the police. So the father gets angry. So he says that how come you are doing this? This is something that's happening normally. So why are you isolating my son and punishing him? And you should be able to take it in the right perspective. Now what is the right perspective? So there is the problem. The father has changed his perspective. Now other interesting cases, mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. You know that the mother-in-law happened to be once a daughter-in-law, but then why is it so many TV serials becomes big hit? Because they are centering on this conflict between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. Can't there be mother-in-laws who can understand daughters-in-laws properly? Is there always conflict between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law? The reason is again the standpoint. So the daughter-in-law, especially in an Indian context, is supposed to be very docile, submissive, obedient, respectful, showing respect, will not say any word against the mother-in-law. So when the daughter-in-law, even after spending 10-20 years in this kind of training, when she takes the position of a mother-in-law, that is when her son gets married and a new girl enters her home as the daughter-in-law, then her attitude changes, her perspective changes. Now she expects that the daughter-in-law should treat her respectfully, she should be obedient, she should be touching her feet to show the respect, she should be listening to what she tells in terms of cooking, she should take her permission before buying something, and so on. Now between manager and worker, so the manager may be climbing his social ladder, having started his position as a worker, but once he becomes manager, he maintains a distance. So whatever he thought should be exempted, like for example coming late, when he was a worker he thought that it's something that the manager should not take it seriously, but when he becomes a manager he takes it very seriously and imposes strict rules and tries to regulate the workers. He makes it very strict and he becomes a demanding manager. Why is it so? The perspective that changes. And another interesting case is husband and wife. Again, especially in patriarchal societies where the male dominates the society, it's always looked at from the point of view of the male. The male is always right, the female is always wrong. So much so, even physiological problems, like let us say there is no child in the family even after 10 years of marriage, whom will the society suspect? If it is a patriarchal one, they will immediately suspect the female. They will not even think whether the problem will be there with the male. So prejudice, perspective, and then the male himself as the husband thinks that he is always right, the wife is always wrong, and he should tell something that the wife listens all the time. Now look at this interesting example, it's an interesting anecdote. Once the husband is quite concerned, and then he went to a doctor, and then he told the doctor that he had a suspicion that his wife has some hearing difficulty. So he told him that, doctor, I think that my wife has some hearing difficulty. She is not able to hear whatever I say. She is not listening properly. She is not responding properly. So I want to know whether she is becoming deaf. But how do I know this? And I don't want my wife to be hurt. I don't want her to know that I am doubting this. Then the doctor said that, oh, that's simple. He said that you go home, and then how is your home? He said that it's a kind of rectangular arrangement. Rooms are arranged consecutively, one after another. So he said that, okay, you go, just stand at the front entrance, and then you say something. And then if she doesn't hear you, go to the next door and then you say something. If she doesn't listen to you, go to the next one. Go until the kitchen Okay. And then talk to her closely and tell me at what point of time she responded to you correctly, clearly. So, I will be able to gauge whether she has become deaf or she is losing it slowly, whether we can rectify that easily. I will be able to tell you, just find out this and come to me. So, the husband went home. So, he just stood at the front door and then he could see that after 4 rooms, that is in the 4th room, that is kitchen. So, his wife was showing the back and she was cooking something. So, from the outside front door only, he just shouted aloud. He asked her, "Honey, what's cooking?" There was no response. He went to the next room. Again he shouted aloud. He asked, "My dear, I am asking you, what are you cooking?" Again no response. He went to the next door and then again he shouted aloud. He asked her, "Honey, I am asking you only, tell me what are you cooking?" No response. He went just close to her, put his hand on the shoulder and just next to her ear, he spoke slightly aloud. He asked her, "What are you cooking, my dear?" She just looked at him and said, "Chicken, and I am shouting this for the 4th time." Okay, she said chicken and I am shouting this for the 4th time. I hope you have understood the joke. What does it mean? That it is not the husband who is doubting his wife, but the wife knew already, or perhaps it is the husband who is deaf and he is not able to hear her properly and she has been shouting. What does this anecdote tell us? Again, it tells us very clearly about the position that the husband holds, from which he could not take a different perspective, that he must be having the hearing difficulty, not his wife. He doubted that his wife must be having the hearing difficulty, that is why he was not able to get responses. Contrary to that, his wife proved to him that it was he who had the difficulty and the wife did not bother about it. She was managing, she was adjusting, but it was only when he wanted to experiment and find out, so the truth came out. So, this is clear cut indication that when we hold a position, our way of looking at things, especially the other person, is completely clouded, myopic, because of the perspective that the position gives us. Now, keeping this in mind will help you to always take the other person's perspective. I will come to that. Let us look at more problems that is coming because of this perspective and personality barriers. There is also this tendency to stereotype and jump to conclusions. So, when we stereotype somebody, what we do is we put them as kind of typical figures representing certain characteristic traits. So, for example, when Shakespeare portrays the character of Shylock in Merchant of Venice, so the way he has portrayed him as a Jew, indicating that Jews are very shrewd, okay, and then they will even go to the extent of taking the pound of flesh if the money is not returned. So, they are very cold hearted and so on. Now, this is a kind of stereotyping. So, next time you see a Jew, so you get into the mind that this kind of impression after reading the play. Now, look at the categories. The stereotyping and jumping to conclusion can happen because of the nationality. When you say Indian, Pakistani, Chinese, American, European, so each nationality has certain attributes. Depending on the political affinity, you see certain country and the countrymen as your friends or as your enemies. The moment some name is mentioned, immediately you jump into conclusion and you think that, oh, this person will be an enemy, he may be a terrorist, he cannot be a friend. and somebody else from some other country, you think that, oh, he is our friend. How do you know that? Because our country is friendly with their country, and so on. Religion, as I was giving the example, Jew, Parsi, Hindu, Muslim, Christian. So, each religion also attributes certain characteristics. Now, these characteristics need not be universal. When you try to stereotype, what you do is you try to say that all Christians will be like this, all Hindus will be like this, and so on. Race, color. So, race, you say black or Negro, white, European. So, this is this seeing things in terms of race and color. In terms of work, for example, professor, businessman, smuggler, the way you look at a smuggler and the way you look at a professor, rickshaw puller, sweeper, beggar. Now, suppose let us say in a corridor a sweeper as well as a professor both were walking by, and somebody left the mobile and the mobile was lost. Now, only two people were there, one was a professor, the other one was a sweeper. Obviously, if the police will come, you know that the police will first catch the sweeper and try to find out whether the sweeper took the mobile or not, and will not suspect the professor because of stereotyping. Okay. You always stereotype that the sweeper is the one who is likely to steal things, not the professor. And in truth, there is a possibility that the professor got tempted by looking at a costly mobile and he thought that nobody would be watching it, and then he took it and put it in his pocket and ran off. So, that is possible. So, when you stereotype, you actually misjudge or you become judgmental, use prejudiced opinion which should be avoided. Even food, for example, vegetarians having prejudice over non-vegetarians and vice versa. So, if you eat this kind of food, so you are detestable, I do not like you, I can't stand, I can't sit here when you are eating this kind of food. So, that prejudice that comes in the mind. Education, so that also stereotypes. IITians, okay, and then government college student and private college engineering student, and private college engineering student from a very remote village and private college ones from a metropolitan city, or the college that is very highly rated and the one that is not rated or ranked at all. Now, how do the students see themselves? So, I am from this reputed institute, you are from a institute which is low in standard. So, immediately stereotyping that your knowledge level, your IQ level is lower than mine. So, immediate stereotyping which should be avoided. What we do when you stereotype? What we do is actually we deny them individuality. So, people are different, people have unique qualities, unique characteristics, irrespective of the fact that they belong to your religion, they belong to your race, they belong to your nationality, they come from a particular social, educational, cultural background. Despite all these things, people have their own unique qualities which you cannot flatten, bring under one umbrella and say that this group of people are like this. This colored skin people will have this kind of characteristics. So, that is just stereotyping, and then which will make you to jump to conclusions and cause barriers to communication. What do we do? What do we do again? We interpret within the framework of a stereotype the symbols these individuals display. We will not separate the symbols and attribute unique characteristics. We put them in group, and then we think that they will all behave like that only. Another thing that causes personality barrier is rigidity of thought. Rigidity of thought, rigidity of thinking, that also blurs the power of discrimination. Rigidity is opposite to openness, flexibility, ability to adapt to new ideas, accept new ideas. Rigidity of thought. People who neither learn from new information nor accept any contradictory view. What do these people do when they are rigid? They will always say when you go and tell them something, they will say that, oh, that is not acceptable, that is not the way it should be done, I cannot accept this, I do not believe this, I do not consider this to be of a standard one. So, rigidity of thinking, especially if it is a contradictory view, they will not accept it at all. Close to them is the know-it-all types. These people are the ones who say that they know everything, know it all. You can identify these people by words like all. So, they will say that all of them are like that, always, it is always done that way, everybody cheats, everybody does it that way, none will believe this, none can do this, never, it is never done, never can be done this way, nobody will be willing to do this. Now, even these kind of characteristics, rigidity, this know-it-all type, so they also act as barriers to communication. Now, in this lecture, what we have done so far, I tried to talk to you at the beginning about the significance of communication once again, and then I said that to be very effective communicators, you need to focus on the barriers. Communication is not happening as smooth, as easily as a leaf to a tree. It is not happening that spontaneous. It is action oriented, interactive, transactional. Now, in all these cases, there are sometimes barriers which are not making this communication happen effectively. And talking about barriers, I started with the first kind of barriers, that is personality barriers, and I have tried to tell you that most of them are psychological in nature. Sometimes we stereotype people, sometimes it is attributed to rigidity of thinking, the kind of people who say that they know everything, the know-it-all type. Now, with this I conclude this lecture. We will continue with more examples on personality barriers. We go to interpersonal barriers, and then slowly we will move to organizational barriers, and then we talk about miscommunication. For the time being, we will stop here. Think over these barriers that I told you. Ask yourself what kind of barriers came when you discussed with somebody. What would you do? What kind of position that you hold? So, what kind of psychological block is coming to you because of the position that you take? Can you take your wife's view if you happen to be the rigid husband? Can you take the junior's view if you are the senior? Can you take the workers' ideas if you happen to be the manager? Ask these questions, think aloud, and you arrive at your own revelatory ideas that will build up your effective communication. So, we will continue in the next lecture. Till then, bye. Thank you.